Hello and welcome back to Sullivan County 4-H Learn by Doing, Starting Your Vegetables Indoors series. And this is the last video of this series, and today we're going to focus on how to transition your plants from being inside to being outside in your garden these next couple of weeks, hopefully, if the weather cooperates. So your plants are probably in one of these three stages. They might still have some size to grow on them, and don't panic, they will definitely catch up. It's okay. You might have them more this size right now, or if you have some that really grow quickly, you might have them this big by now. But if they're not quite to this size, don't panic. You're, I'm sure, still right on track. So what I wanted to talk about is now it's starting to warm up. Sometimes in Sullivan County here, we still have some nighttime temperatures that are in the lower 30s. So what we're going to start to do over the next couple of weeks is something called hardening them off. And what that means is during the day, if it's supposed to be nice and sunny and the temperature is supposed to be good and not too windy, you're going to want to move them outside for a little while and expose them to being outdoors and getting used to being outdoors. If your nighttime temperatures are, say, above 40, 45, you're going to want to leave them outside. And this is really what helps them to harden off. But if there's a threat of frost, or if it's skirting on the edge of being close to freezing temperatures, you're going to want to bring them back inside, because these, of course, are not frost tolerant. So even if it's a light frost, you're going to have damage on your plants. So we definitely want to be careful and pay attention to the weather from now on, but on the chances that you can, leave them outside as much as you can, as often as you can, and as long as you can. So as we start to enter more towards Memorial Weekend in June, that's usually when we stop having nighttime frost temperatures around here. That doesn't mean that they can't still happen, because of course the weather does what it wants to, but you're gonna probably be thinking about planting your garden either Memorial Weekend or shortly after that. So you want to start this hardening off process around this time, barring that the temperature agrees with you and works with you. Also at this time, you're going to want to, if you want to do any direct seeding in your garden, like corn or peas or beans, you'll want to start paying attention to the nighttime temperatures. Also, for if you can work them into the soil. Some varieties you can do right when the ground is workable, and then those are the varieties that can handle a little bit of frost. So if you haven't already, you can go ahead and put those in your garden. But a lot of them, you don't want them to germinate while there's still a threat of frost, because it can kill the seedling. So these next couple of weeks, pay attention to the nighttime temperatures, and if you think that you're in the clear for frost threats, you can go ahead and do your direct sow seeds out there, as well as keep your ones that you're trying to harden off outside. Now, as far as tomatoes go, I wanted to show you a little bit. We talked about pruning tomatoes. So this is a indeterminate tomato here, and just as a reminder, that means that it's just going to keep growing and growing and growing, and it's going to throw off all these branches, and there's no end on the size of it, as opposed to a determinate tomato that grows to a determined height. So on these guys, and tomatoes in general, I like to plant the stalk really deep in the ground so that I get a very nice strong root system and a strong stem to support, hopefully, all this fruit that I'm going to have. So I usually, on my tomatoes, will take off, you can either pinch off or you can use your clippers. I usually take off the first couple of leaves here on the bottom, and I will plant this plant up to like here in the ground, because tomatoes are one of those plants that if you plant their stem deep, they will actually put roots out where they think there's soil. So I like to plant them extra deep, get a really good strong base to them, especially on the indeterminate tomatoes, because they tend to get so heavy, and that helps to support them. In addition to a tomato cage, it helps to really support the stem and make sure that I don't have any stems that break on me as they're growing. And then the other thing that I'll do, these are all really too young to show you. They don't really have these yet, but you can see from, hopefully, where I took off that lower stem, there's a tiny little leaf starting here. And what that is called, that's called a sucker. and they are branches that develop at the crook of leaf nodes, and then they grow upward like that. So it's a branch and then a little branch that comes off. And when I prune my tomatoes, whether they're determinate or indeterminate, I always take those suckers off once they start growing, because it's additional energy that the plant is putting into it. Now on my determinate tomatoes, I don't really prune them in the way that I do in indeterminate, but I still remove those suckers so that more energy can go into producing fruit. So that's just a little crash course on how to start pruning your tomatoes. So take off the lower leaves, plant them deep so they have a nice strong stem to them. Hopefully avoid skinny, thin stems that might crush under weight. And don't forget to prune the suckers, especially if you have an indeterminate tomato. Make sure you do some pruning on them so that you get good fruit yield. You will still get fruit yield if you don't prune them. It just might be a little less, and you might be more likely to have green tomatoes going into the frost season, which of course you can use in other dishes and isn't a problem. But if you really are looking for those ripe tomatoes, you're going to want to make sure that the plant focuses on making sure the fruit that it has for the correct amount of time is ripened by the time frost comes. So that is a quick overview on them. And just in general with your garden, when you do plant it outside, you can start it off with a fertilizer as you mix it into the soil, some compost and some fertilizer, just to give the plants a boosted start. And every so often you can add fertilizer to your watering schedule to make sure that they keep steady. The important thing, especially again with tomatoes, is to keep your watering steady. Now these guys, while the plant will come back if they start to wilt because they've gone too long without water, that can actually affect the taste of the fruit. If they're allowed to get dry and then they get deluged with water and then dry again and then deluged with water, that tends to actually make their fruit a little more watery, and you're more likely to deal with something called blossom rot or bottom rot, and that's when the blossom on the bottom of the tomato, instead of drying up and falling off, will rot the whole fruit. So consistent, constant, predictable, even watering is the way you want to go with these fruits and other vegetables in your garden to make sure that they grow consistently and that it doesn't affect the taste of your fruit. That's very important, to make sure that they're not sitting in water but they don't get totally bone dry. A nice, constant, even watering is key. So I hope that you have found this series helpful. Again, don't forget to check back throughout the growing season to see what other videos we have going on. And don't forget to subscribe and like Cornell Cooperative Extension Sullivan County on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. You never know, we might put up a random vegetable video if we run into any problems here. So be sure to randomly check that channel to see if there's any other bonus videos out there for you. And don't forget to check out Sullivan County 4-H in the link below in the description. Thank you so much for joining me on this series, and happy growing.